Hey, welcome to Ike's Vintage Tech. I just finished a recap on my Macintosh SE 30 and I can't wait to see how well it works now. Let's check it out. Well, that's not ideal. Stay tuned and I'll show you how easy it was to fix. Thanks for watching. If you like seeing these old machines being brought back to life, please consider subscribing. Alright, before I go ahead and tell you exactly what I did and end the video there, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory of how we got here. Several months ago, I was doing a live stream recapping 3 of these compact Macs. Now, what I did at the time was just the analog boards and then the logic board of the SE30. Should have been pretty straightforward, everything powered back on with the exception of this one. At the end of the video, I had the sad Mac tone that you heard and the machine wouldn't power on. Well, it would power on, it wouldn't boot. You would see the zebra lines and it was just dead. I was pretty upset about that and I figured I must have cooked one of the capacitors and I just put it aside and I was going to get to it eventually. Eventually did come the other day. I took it back out. I recapped the entire board again just in case I borked one of them and I wanted to have a complete clean restart. So I replaced all the tantalum caps and it still did the same thing. At this point, I was scratching my head. I ohmed out the entire board based on the schematics of everything that these capacitors touch, the sound circuit, the ROM, everything. I went through and wrung out everything, and everything was perfect as it should be. This made me even more frustrated because everything electronically was working. It should have been great. Why wasn't it booting? And I went further and further down a rabbit hole, and I just couldn't figure it out. I eventually found a 13-year-old YouTube video by JDW, I'll link it below, where he had the exact same problem, and I had to look into the comments of that thread to see the actual issue, and it turns out my memory was backwards. In this particular board, in this particular setup, I've got 4 SIMs of the OWC 16 meg RAM that you can buy brand new today. And then I have 4 other 1 meg SIMs that are just sitting there taking up space. What I needed to do is flip them around, putting the 4 meg SIMs first in bank A and having the 16 meg SIMs in bank B. Doesn't make sense. You would always think that you'd go larger, smaller, but whatever the case, that's what I did. To make things more confusing, when I was setting up this video to have the same fault in the beginning of the video, I swapped the RAM back so that it would give you the same lines and I could start the video with a fault. Except it didn't. It just booted up. I don't have any explanation for that aside from possibly something in the logic just remembers the RAM now. Maybe I'd have to change out the capacity. I even removed the PRAM battery and everything still just booted fine, so I have no explanation for that. But getting back on track, if you do have a Mac with 16 meg SIMs, you want to be able to populate the first 4 SIMs in the bank A with your lower capacity SIMs, or just fill it completely out with 16 meg SIMs and you'll be fine and you'll never have this issue. It is a rare issue from what I could tell looking online, but it has happened to some people, and that's why I'm making this video, in case it happens to you, and then you at least have something to look back on to see what I did to fix it. One quick thing, the easiest way I've found to get these RAM SIMs out without breaking the tabs is once you get the first one out, it's pretty easy, you can get it with your fingers. The remaining ones are a little harder because you get the SIMs in the way. Take your first SIM that you popped out, apply a little pressure on the SIM you're trying to get out, and lightly put pressure on those clips and it pops right out. With a slight pressure, as soon as you move the clip out just enough, it'll release and you can let go. That way you don't put too much pressure on it and break it. Now, putting in the old SIMs is pretty straightforward. Everything just clips right in nice and easy, just like that. Now, there is one more thing to note. I do have the original ROM SIM in here, and this will not support these 16 meg SIMs right off the bat. You do have to install 32-bit mode if you want that to work. Now, you could also go ahead and get a ROM-inator or several other companies out there that make them, and they work. They're great when they work. The problem I had with this one is it was just a hair too thin and wouldn't make proper contact. Now, you might say, why don't you 3D print the shims? I did. They didn't work either. Now what about putting a bead of solder across the contacts? I did that too. Also did not work. As it turns out, over decades and decades sitting in a case like this, it can cause slight flex on the board itself, therefore making the SIM slot not perfectly flat. And in doing so, no matter what I do with this thing, unless I install it and hold my finger down, nothing I do is going to make it actually work. I've done everything I could find online to get this thing to work, and it just wouldn't. It's not in the books for me. This might go to use in another system, not this one. But I do like it. I do like the idea that you can boot this thing to an actual working system without a hard drive installed, and you can troubleshoot your Mac if it works. That being said, this will just be put back in the static bag for now, and I'll use it later on something else. Now I'm going to say it now, I'm going to say it every single time I do this. Whenever you're working inside of one of these, you want to make sure that the CRT is completely discharged. If you don't have a tool for that, you can make your own with a screwdriver and a piece of wire. I am going to say, unless you're invincible to electricity, then I would definitely recommend discharging your CRT before putting your hands in tight spaces like I am right now. One slip and I touch the wrong contact on here, quite a few volts are going to go through me, and it might not kill me, probably won't, but it'll hurt and it'll ruin my day. So take the time, discharge your CRTs, and definitely do not work on them while they're plugged in unless you really know what you're doing. As I'm putting this together, I do remember one other issue I had with the ROM-inator. In my case, anytime I installed anything in the PDS slot, in this case networking, I have a video card as well, it would not work with the ROM-inator. I don't know if it was something incompatible with my exact system. Maybe there's a small fault in here that only shows up with the ROM-inator, but I could not get any of my PDS cards to work with the ROM-inator when it was working via me pushing down on my finger with it. So it could also just be the fact that even though I was pushing down with my finger, it was not making a clean contact enough to cover all the contacts. So maybe it was booting fine, but out of the 64 pins, the one that controls PDS was not working. That's a theory. I don't know what it was, but in my case, it didn't work. All right, now that I got it all back together, let's see if it works. There's a happy Mac sound. Here's a happy me. Let's go ahead and we'll get into the OS and make sure everything is working as it should. Now, one thing that the ROM-inator is definitely an advantage over the original ROM that I have is that it goes through that extra RAM really quick, where this does take a little bit longer to do a whole memory check on everything. There's one thing I noticed real quick, it might be because I removed the PRAM battery, is that the 32-bit mode addressing for memory was changed back to off. So right now it's only showing 8 meg of RAM. I'm going to go ahead and apply this, reboot the system, and it should show the full 68 meg that should be installed. Alright, and here we have it. It's actually showing the 68 meg that should be in there. And everything is working just fine. I have all my partitions of my 9 terabyte drive showing up, which is great. I have more storage than I'll ever need on this thing. It's an original SCSI hard drive for as long as that decides to work. One of these days, I'm going to decide to put in a blue SCSI or something to that effect. Right now, I'm happy with clicky sounds, so I'm a little bit of a purist in that regards, but to each their own. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like down below. If you wanted to see me do something different or you would have done anything different, let me know in the comments. Thank you once again. Take care.